What is up, guys? Welcome to Cover's College Football Playoff National Championship Betting Preview. We've got a matchup probably no one outside of Fort Worth could have imagined as the reigning national champs, number one ranked Georgia Bulldogs go against everyone's favorite Hypnotoads, the number 4 ranked TCU Horned Frogs. I'm your host, Andrew Cayley, and we will be breaking down this massive college football title game from all angles today as we talk to beat writers, analysts, and some professional bettors. And of course, we'll be throwing in some best bets along the way. But before we get underway, let's take a quick look at the teams and updated lines. As of Friday afternoon, Georgia is still a big 12.5 point favorite after opening at 13.5 with a total sitting at 62.5. But some 63s are starting to pop up. TCU is 13-1 this season thanks to an electric offense led by Max Duggan and Quentin Johnston, and pulled off the upset over Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl, winning a 51-45 shootout as 8-point underdogs. The Hypnotoads keep doing it. Georgia, on the other hand, a perfect 14-0 after escaping a thrilling comeback victory over Ohio State in the Peach Bowl, another team built on strong defense, and of course, the confidence of quarterback Stetson Bennett. With that in mind, let's hop right into it, guys. Let's welcome in Dayne Young. We're basically a year removed from him joining us for last year's preview, so welcome back, Dayne.
Thanks for having me. Always a delight. And I don't know if there's as much value in Georgia this year based on what happened last year, but we'll find some things for you.
Okay, Dayne. So not really a betting question first, just something I've personally been thinking of a bit. Even with all the talent that left from last year's roster, obviously it's a historic defense and one of the greatest teams of all time, people say. Even with all that talent that left, is this Georgia team potentially better than last year's team?
In a few spots they are, but overall as a team, I don't think so. But I actually think there's a few teams in college football from last season that are better than probably any team in college football this season. It seems like there's more parity this year, maybe some talent spread around a bit more. Look, what Georgia lost on defense last year was not replaced. They've done a good job. They're a good defense. They're young in some spots. They still have Jalen Carter, who is probably the best player on this year's defense and last year's defense, as crazy as that is to say. They just didn't have the experience up front. And right now, Georgia's secondary is kind of holding on to the end of the season, and they miss a little bit of the experience that they had with Lewis Seen, with just a few guys back on that end of the team. Overall, I don't think this team is probably better than last year's team, other than there are some spots on offense where Georgia's playing with a lot more confidence this season than it did last year.
So the real question here is, of course, then with this spread being nearly 2 touchdowns, how does Georgia not only defend its title, but how does it cover this spread against this TCU team that has obviously shocked everyone and seemingly won't quit? Is Georgia the team that can finally kind of put them where the power ratings kind of say they are?
In reviewing what TCU does, I think this all comes down to how decisive is Stetson Bennett. Because if he plays decisive, if he's the gunslinger, if he runs when it's there, if he passes quickly, then Georgia's going to do well and probably score more than 40 points in this game. And then that's how you get to the point that you try to cover a spread this big. If he double clutches like he did a few times against Ohio State, then maybe this gets a little squirrely for Georgia in terms of covering the spread. It's a big spread. Georgia's a big favorite. Can they do it? Yes. We saw them cover a decent spread against a talented Tennessee team. We saw them run Oregon out of the building first game of the season. If Georgia's clicking on all cylinders, it'll score points. And the question is, what will TCU do to kind of match it tit for tat with Max Duggan and that offensive attack?
So, Dayne, now that you've made that case there for Georgia, and you're looking to make a little extra pizza money for the weekend on Monday night, what's your best bet for the national championship?
I'll give you a bet and I'll give you a prop. I tend to like the over. I mean, defenses aren't playing as well later in the season. So 63 is the last that I've seen. I'm sure it varies on where you look. I think Georgia will score 40 points, but I also think Georgia's going to give up some points too. And when I saw with TCU, it can score quickly based on mistakes. I like the over for the 63. If you want to prop, TCU does not really rush the pocket very much, and they more rely on having an extra defensive back to reduce passing windows. So I like Stetson Bennett over 12.5 rushing yards because he'll run around a little bit. I just don't think he'll have the sack numbers to negate some of that. So Stetson Bennett more than 12.5 rushing yards.
I actually really like that play a lot, Dane. I have that in my betting card as well. I think Kirby Smart, after seeing what happened in that last game there, that he's going to tell him, like, if you see some green there, you're just going to go at some points in this game. So like that play a lot. Thank you very much for joining us here today. You can find Dane's work at ugasports.com and follow him on Twitter at Dayne Young. That's Dayne Young. Thanks again, Dane, and good luck with your bets. Next up, we're talking to Steven Johnson. Steven is a TCU beat writer for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and does great work covering the Horned Frogs. Steven, I know you did a lot of traveling today, so thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the invite. Happy to be here in LA. I'm already ready for the game.
Now, before we dive into the matchup specifically, just tell me this. As a person who follows this team every day, when did you start believe that this Horned Frogs team could play for a national championship? Was it the win over Texas or maybe Baylor? Or was it when the clock struck 0 against Michigan? Like, when did that thought enter your brain?
Probably where they beat Oklahoma. Look, we found out later on that Oklahoma wasn't great, but Oklahoma was fully healthy at that time. Dylan Gabriel was available. They came in rolling 3-0, and TCU just smacked them. They were up maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns even before Gabriel went out with a concussion or whatever injury he had. So I think that game, TCU hadn't beaten them since 2014, if I remember correctly. Just the way they did that, beating Oklahoma, that just usually doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And they looked like they were the completely better roster, stronger, faster, better. So that was a game for me, and I think that was a game for just about everybody in the program. They were like, okay, we might have something special here.
So the money question is, of course, now that TCU has gotten here and they've been one of the best bets in college football all season, 10-3-1 against the spread. A lot of people are jumping on those points with the Horned Frogs in the early betting action. They've definitely become America's team. I would say everyone's rooting for them. But obviously, this is a very good Georgia team they're going up against. What do the Frogs need to do to not only cover those 12.5 points, but pull off another shocking upset?
I think kind of similar to what they did against Michigan. I think they need to start fast. If they're able to get maybe even a 10-point, even just a touchdown lead, if they can strike first and kind of just get on Georgia, and I think the team already has the belief that they can play with Georgia, but it's different, man. Like with Michigan, when they got that pick 6 after they got that stop on the opening drive, I think it just kind of took their confidence to another level. So if they can start fast, I mean, if they get down, 2 possessions, it's probably a wrap. But start fast. Force Stetson been into a turnover too. TCU's defense has been tremendous at doing that all season. So those are the 2 biggest things. And I think it'll also come down to just Max Duggan. He's going to have the game of his life as a thrower and as a runner. I think this could be a game where he has to throw for 200 and rush for another 100 on the ground.
I can definitely see Max Duggan rushing for a bunch of yards in this one. We saw what Ohio State was trying to do with CJ Stroud in that game. Not essentially rolling out typically, but definitely moving the pocket some to kind of negate that pressure that Jalen Carter can create. So lastly, Steven, what would you say is your best bet for this national championship game?
I would take TCU to cover, especially if you can get it at 13.5, that would be great. But I think I would still take it at 12.5. I think TCU, they have the offensive line to withstand all the Georgia strength up front. They have the receivers create those mismatches in space. And I think the defense is not as bad as some of the numbers suggest. They just don't have the depth that maybe the offense has or some of those other great teams around the country. But I think the defense will make enough plays, man. They went 11 straight games with forcing a turnover. That streak was snapped in the Big 12 title game, but then obviously they did what they did last week against Michigan. So I think Max Duggan's going to make enough plays, and the defense is going to get a turnover or 2, and TCU is going to be in this game in the 4th quarter. So take TCU to cover plus 12.5.
Take TCU plus the points, Steven says. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find Steven's work in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and you can follow him on Twitter at StevenMJohnson_. Thanks again, Steven, and enjoy the game.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys.
Okay, guys, our next guest is college football analyst Douglas Farmer. Doug writes about Notre Dame football for Notre Dame on NBC, and he isn't too shabby when it comes to handicapping the college game, as well as he contributes some great picks, pieces, and previews for us here at Covers. And I'm kind of shocked that he hasn't replaced me as the host of this show by this point or just taken my job altogether. Doug, thanks for being here today.
You joke, Andrew, but there were a few weeks last year where somebody took some time off, and I had to do my best Stetson Bennett impersonation to keep us afloat.
You did. I think you did a great job as well. And so, Doug, as a guy who loves college football, covers the game, and as a bettor, what was your initial reaction when you saw the line for this national championship match between TCU and Georgia?
My initial reaction was disappointment. I was hoping to see just 30 seconds of a full 2 touchdowns so I could fire on TCU. I'm staying away from anything under 2 touchdowns for now. I'm sure I'll give in Sunday night or Monday morning, but for now, I really wanted to get that full 2 touchdowns and just assume worst case scenario, a garbage time TD would get me that.
So, Doug, what's your best bet if you're not loving the side or the total here? What's your best bet for the national championship here?
My best bet is one that will make the entire game interesting until it cashes. The over-under on Stetson Bennett interceptions is a half, and I'm taking that over. I'm taking the yes, he will throw a pick. I'm seeing it at about neg 108, depending where you look. And to me, it's a simple numbers game. One bad play, and I've got it. TCU's 3-3-5 creates different pressures, different coverages. Stetson Bennett has faced that only once this season against Mississippi State, threw 2 picks on 37 pass attempts. The rest of the year, he threw 5 on nearly 400 pass attempts. So most of the year, he's 1 pick every 80 throws. Against that 3-3-5, he was 1 pick on every fewer than 20 throws. That's what I'm betting against TCU. We saw TCU's defense. It is a bit of a ball hawk. It forced J.J. McCarthy to throw 2 picks in that playoff semifinal. Up until then, he had thrown 3 all year. That's just that little bit of twist from that 3-3-5. To me, that's creating a ripe chance for a turnover from Stetson Bennett.
And I think TCU needs those turnovers in this game if they want to keep that game close. They obviously got those against Michigan, and they'll have to take advantage of those situations here. And Bennett, like Kirby Smart said it after the game there, he called his guy out right on national television, right on the field, being like, Bennett needs to stay within the system a little better. He's a bit of a gunslinger, and he's a confident guy, and he's been known to throw the ball into some spots that he probably shouldn't. So I think this is a solid play here, and it's going to lead into my best bet a little later on in the show there as well. Doug, any final thoughts on the national championship before we get you going here?
Oh, I just want to say, as while I'm betting on Stetson Bennett to make a mistake, he's earned that confidence. He's earned that gunslinger mentality. He's won a national championship. Is probably about to win his second. I'm just saying, 1 bad play out of 40, and I'm going to make some money.
I love it. Doug, going with Stetson Bennett to throw an interception in the national title game. Thanks so much for joining me today. You guys can follow Doug on Twitter at D_farmer. Good luck with your national championship bets, buddy.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, it feels like we've saved the best for last one more time this season. The man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Brad Powers. Thanks for joining me one more time in this college football today. Brad, how was your holidays there?
Excellent. But, there's always opportunity for growth in 2023, and hopefully the pocketbook grows a little bit with this national championship game.
I feel like you and I have been talking about TCU for basically the entire second half of the season and how the Horned Frogs results don't really match up with their power ratings. And now they're in the national championship. So have you changed your thoughts on them at all? And how do you handle them with a spread in a national championship game of nearly 2 touchdowns?
So I'll start with my power rankings. It's not like I haven't upgraded TCU. I've upgraded them as much as any Power 5 team in the country, with the exception of Duke is the only team I've upgraded more. So certainly I've went along. They've exceeded expectations. I've raised my power rating. But the problem is, look no further than the Michigan game. The final score doesn't always match up with the box score. Michigan game's yet another example of this. 2 pick sixes. Michigan somehow at the 2-yard line twice comes away with 0 points. Change any one of those 4 big significant plays, and yeah, TCU's the right side as far as against the spread, but I'm not sure that they're playing for the national championship here on Monday.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. I think Michigan could have made some adjustments earlier on in that game. They kind of let things go a little too long. I didn't like that they weren't disguising their coverages enough as well on defense. They were kind of making their motions a little early there. And I think if they had made just a few little tweaks along the way, like you said, they needed those 2 pick sixes to win the game. And when it was all said and done. So Here we are once again, Brad. We're national championship. What's your play for this big game?
So I'm going to go derivative here, but let me first say this. I lean with Georgia, but I'm waiting for maybe possibly a better price. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Obviously, a majority of the handle is going to come on game day. A lot of money came in against Georgia in the semifinal. A lot of money was on Ohio State there. So I'm waiting for a better price. Buy price for me to have a bigger bet would be 11. Maybe we'll see it. I see a couple books with 11.5 right now. I also lean over, so we can touch the total a little bit there. I also lean over. I don't see TCU's defense stopping Georgia too much, but I'm also concerned about that Georgia pass defense that's been exposed the last couple of games. So when it's all said and done, best bet for me is we're going Georgia team total over 37.5 here. Keep in mind, let's go to TCU's last game. Despite getting 2 pick sixes from Michigan, despite stopping Michigan at the goal line, not once, but twice where Michigan gets 0 points, Michigan still scores 45 points against this TCU defense. And I don't see a pathway to much success here for TCU's defense. I mean, do they pull, they run that 3-3-5 defense. Obviously, there's a big mismatch at the line of scrimmage where I think Georgia can really pound at them. So do they bring that, strong safety into the box? I think that exposes TCU's pass defense, especially with Georgia's, found a couple of wide receivers they haven't had all season, and A.D. Mitchell and Arian Smith. So I'm going to go over 37.5 here on Georgia's team total.
Yeah, I think that's a good number too. A bit of a key number there, right below the 38 there. I agree with the pass defense part of this year. I think TCU has been kind of covering up their warts a bit. An appropriate thing to say about the Frogs there. But I like this play a lot. I really don't see them slowing down Stetson Bennett a whole lot in this game. There, I saw this stat that they rank 100. They rank 125th in passing plays of 20 yards allowed or more this season. So I think Bennett's going to have a pretty good game in this one as well. So there you have it. Brad has Georgia over its team total of 37.5. And thanks again so much for joining me today, Brad, and all season long. You can find his work at bradpowerssports.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at bradpowers7. Thanks again, Brad, and good luck with your bets. Okay, guys, so to wrap things up, my best bet is Stetson Bennett over 275.5 passing yards. He's averaged nearly 310 passing yards per game in his 2 SEC championship games and 3 college football playoff games. TCU does have a ball-hawking defense, but it can cost them. They've given up the 6th most passing plays of 20 yards or more in the entire FBS. That is 125th out of 131 FBS teams, and they just gave up 343 yards passing to J.J. McCarthy of the Wolverines. I think there are several avenues for Bennett to get to 300 yards in this one. So over 275.5 passing yards is my best bet for the national championship. Once again, thank you all my guests for joining us and thanks for joining us for the entirety of this college football season. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Good luck with all your bets in the national championship game, and we'll see y'all next fall.